Hey everyone, welcome to the Civo DevOps Bootcamp. I am Kunal. I work as a developer advocate here. Super excited to launch this series, and yeah, let's get started. So today we are talking about what this series is and how we're going to be covering over the course of few weeks. So this session is a little bit more about an introduction to DevOps. So like what is DevOps, how do we get started, and what are the various terminologies. In the future series, in the future weeks, you'll be learning about what containers are and all the other domains in DevOps that people work with, like builds and testing, release and deploying. We're going to be having an amazing SRE talk, like what is site reliability engineering, how do you get started with that. We'll have a talk on fast feedback and automation, and also we'll be looking into a little bit more about the comparison of K3s versus Kubernetes. So let me get the panelists on the screen. Hey everyone, thanks a lot for joining. Cool. So these are all the nice Civo folks. And maybe we can start with some introductions. How about Dinesh? You go first.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Dinesh. I'm Director of Innovation at Civo. My background, going back a good long time, started off as a software developer. I've then also done first-line support in managed hosting companies, second-line support, third-line support. My most recent role at Civo, Director of Innovation, has been around designing and rolling out our new Civo Stack platform.
Hi, go ahead.
My name is Kai. I'm a developer/developer advocate at Civo. So I joined Civo about 2 years ago. My background is not in tech, so I am a sort of somebody who's converted into doing tech. So I joined as a web developer and have sort of moved into developer advocacy and this whole DevOps thing. So excited to talk to you all about it.
Alistair?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. I'm Alistair. I'm a cloud native platform engineer. I help companies build next generation platforms for their services and deploying fast for their customers. So thanks.
I guess that leaves me. Hello, everybody. My name is Anais. You might have come across my 100 Days of Kubernetes series. So I started learning about containers and Kubernetes and everything related to cloud native 10 months ago after working for several years in the blockchain space. And now I'm an SRE/developer advocate at Civo.
Awesome. And I believe I introduced myself already, so we can get started. Cool. So regarding this session, we're talking about what is DevOps and how it came into picture and some career options related to it, and a little bit more about some of the other parts. So before we get started with the main concepts, Alistair, would you like to maybe share about what is DevOps? Maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. So DevOps as an idea was kind of born 2008, 2009. There was this idea that developers and people responsible for building features and shipping code, and the operations teams, the people who were responsible for taking that code and running it in production, keeping it alive, making sure that it was available for their customers. And the idea was that these two groups kind of clashed a bit. The developers were only really worried about shipping features as fast as possible. They didn't really have to deal with production incidents or outages, and then they would sort of pass their code over to the operations teams, who'd take it, who'd install it into computers, keep it alive, run it on the internet. And they kind of had this conflicting view. Developers want to ship features, their metrics for their jobs are about how many features they can push, whereas the operations teams, it was more, is the site available? How many times have there been errors? So they really didn't traditionally want anything to change. Anytime you change something, there's the chance that the code will break or the deployment will break. So the idea was to kind of bring these two groups together, get them collaborating, working together, and almost share the same goal. It's like your customer is the customers. It's not fighting each other's team, so bringing those two groups together and basically sharing the same goal. I don't know if anyone else wants to add any context or jump in. Kai, you got anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly the important part, is that it's a thing to enable collaboration and so DevOps isn't like a single thing that you do, right? DevOps, it comes from two words, developer and operations, or so the two teams that used to be separate historically, maybe the idea is that you're bringing these two things closer to each other, and you're not maintaining an active separation.
Yeah, it's a culture thing, really. It's the way you set up your organization. It's the way you set up the teams. You've got your developer team that's not siloed and your operations teams that are not siloed. You want them talking to each other. You want them working together. You want them sharing the pain and sharing the success as well. Operations are generally the ones that get woken up at 3 a.m. because the website's gone down, and you come into the morning and the developers there going, oh yeah, no, I just pushed this just before I went to bed because I was up late. I pushed it went to bed, and then oh no, the website went down and someone gets paged. It's just sharing that understanding and sharing that knowledge.
I would actually emphasize the cultural aspect that you just brought up, that you can have in an organization, you can have a DevOps team who's responsible for DevOps related activities, right? But then you end up in some cases where you have still the DevOps team being separate from engineering teams. And then you don't have you don't have the idea of DevOps and the whole process and culture enforced across the organization if you end up in this kind of scenario.
And I guess you'd end up with a developer team, an operations, like an engineering team, and a DevOps team that's sitting in the middle.
yeah, trying to manage both and trying to negotiate between both teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Most definitely.
If you're making separate teams, right, then that sort of defeats the purpose of that interaction between the two, of what was said earlier about, oh, I pushed some code, I didn't know it was going to break things. Is there are necessarily going to be specialists who know more about things like this will work on our platform, or this is how I make this new feature work, on two extremes of the same thing. But they absolutely need to talk to each other, and that's why DevOps is about integration rather than silos. It's not about a DevOps team or a platform team and a developer team. It's bringing those teams together.
There's an interesting point. Sorry, go on, Annis. Go on.
No, I just wanted to to add to that it's also about enablement, that you have the DevOps engineers and people with DevOps-related responsibilities, enabling engineers to push code more securely, to feel more confident in their activities that they have to do while updating features, fixing bugs, and so on.
I believe we did mention that. No, go ahead.
There's an interesting point here around kind of the timelines when DevOps kind of got really big. Around about 2008, 2009, it was really in its infancy, a core group of people talking about the idea. So around about the same time that cloud computing and cloud computing platforms were starting to take off. And we've really seen the two trends kind of trend in the same direction. So the more companies are adopting public cloud platforms, the more they're buying into this idea of kind of the DevOps mentality, the DevOps philosophy of, teams can build, deploy, run, and support their own services by using these sort of automation tools and platforms. It used to be really hard to provision a computer. It used to be a physical data center. Like, you guys at Civo have got physical data centers you have to go into and physically put things in racks. Whereas nowadays, I as a cloud platform engineer can write a few scripts or call an API and have a machine ready to go to accept my code. So that kind of has helped bring these two paradigms together on that phase, and the kind of rise of those two things together is really important.
We do have a question on the screen because I did mention we'll be talking about SRE in a future talk. So Sunny is asking, hey everyone, excited to be here. Can you please explain a difference between DevOps and SRE? And I believe we did already cover the topics we're going to be covering in this bootcamp, but maybe someone can take a shot at the first question.
Dinesh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Damn. I'd probably say that it's just a role in an organization that has a DevOps culture, and that they're taking part in like a cross-discipline team. And you have an SRE that have their responsibilities and their KPIs based around uptime, but also they're responsible for developing tools as well. So like Anais said about enabling developers, if you've got a tool that tells you once you've deployed an application, if there are loads of errors coming up, and as an SRE you're able to give that information out to the developer, they can self-serve. They don't need to now create an alert for you as an SRE or platform engineer to then go and fix. You can go, oh, developer, you've deployed this, there's an error, off you go. Here are the logs, here are the alerts, here are the metrics that you can use to work out whether or not you've made a good release or bad release.
I would also go ahead.
Anna. Sorry.
No, you can go.
No, please.
Okay. I would also, like, from my perspective, and that's like not textbook based, is that SRE is more specific set of principles, of defined procedures, of rituals and processes that you implement. So it's very much like it's more, I guess it's more opinionated, versus within DevOps you have a wide spectrum of different activities that fall under DevOps, and those activities, those responsibilities could be falling on some of them on engineers, some of them on operations team, on DevOps team, or on SRE as well. And SRE is more like a specific, I guess, a section within that does, that's responsible, like Dinesh mentioned, for certain outcomes.
Yeah, I guess so SRE site reliability engineering is about precisely that, is about reliability and stability. Whereas DevOps is like, it's more than that. It's everything around getting applications deployed reliably and accurately and safely and securely and all of those good things onto platforms. And then what Alistair was saying about, these days you can almost abstract away the platform. That it's not a physical computer. I mean, it is a physical object somewhere, but you don't have to physically touch something to make it work.
Now, here's a follow-up question, in case we don't have a question right now from the audience. But
we do have plenty.
Okay, just as a follow-up to what Alistair was saying earlier, do you, just as a general, I don't have an opinion per se, or it's not like something that I want to enforce as an opinion, but can you outsource DevOps from your org? Let's say you will have an organization that does anything engineering related. Can you outsource DevOps, and to what extent can DevOps be outsourced? Just curious about some of the thoughts here.
In my opinion, no. DevOps is much more cultural than it's like, I don't know if people are like agile. It's kind of the same kind of idea that it's a set of philosophies and practices. It's all about building stuff so you've got fast feedback. It's all about enabling your developers to build, run, operate. It's about it's a culture thing. You can't really outsource culture, in my opinion. You can buy tools and you can buy platforms that can help you to fulfill some of those things, but you can't just say, oh, we're doing DevOps because we've bought this product or we've got this company that does our deployments. That's not DevOps.
Yeah, exactly. I think, like Alistair, what you said, we've got this company who does our deployments, right? That's almost them doing the operations side for you. You're doing developing, and that you trust somebody else to do the ops. Whereas DevOps would be bringing that all together.
Yeah, I believe we were talking about it previously that, Dinesh, you were saying something. Go ahead.
I was just going to kind of reiterate with what Alistair was saying is you can't outsource culture. And that's kind of the key thing.
Yeah, that brings us to the point like we were discussing earlier, like it's not about tools, it's about focusing on people, right? So would anyone like to elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's that enablement piece, isn't it? Of you don't want your developer, you do want your developer to be able to deploy something just before they go to bed at 3 a.m. You 100% want that to happen. But what you don't want to do is for them to do that, go to sleep, and wake up in the morning to an upset ops person that's been woken up and spent 4 hours fixing a production issue. What you want is to enable them to do that deployment, get an alert, and go, oh, I'm a bit tired. Let me click the big rollback button. And then everyone sleeps happily through the night.
Sorry, I thought you were finished earlier.
Sorry.
Yeah, regarding the cultural shift, it's also in something somebody just mentioned to me the other day, that if you come in with a mindset, even if you're an engineer and you have the DevOps mindset and you know what people actually go through when they have to debug your application and understand why it's not working in production anymore at 3 a.m., right? You approach your code and your engineering work also from a different perspective. You add different value or you build the application maybe in a slightly different way if you have this DevOps culture implemented within your teams.
I see on the chat there's a lot of questions about, like, how can I move into or start a job in DevOps? And that's what Anais was saying is the most important thing. For me, you need to understand if you are a developer, because you can be a software developer who engages with the DevOps mindset, which means that you need to understand what the other side of this graph that's on the screen kind of means. Is you don't just code and make a pretty thing and then trust that it'll work. You kind of have to take ownership all the way through the process of the releasing, deploying, and operations cycle, so that you don't end up with that situation that Dinesh was telling about, where somebody calls you at 3 a.m. going, "Why did you break the site by pushing that code?"
Maybe we can also go through
the same on the other. It's the same on the other side as well. If you're an operations person and you have traditionally got that pager alert at 3 a.m., is you need to understand that, this developer is probably under a lot of pressure for getting his code out. There are users that are pressuring him. There's management that's pressuring him. He's not doing it at 3 a.m. just to make your life miserable. He's probably been working for the past 48 hours straight, hit the go button, and it's like, phew, I've done it.
Yeah, and because these things these days are just so incredibly complicated, especially, I'm sure we'll talk about microservices in a future sort of session, but these things have so many different touch points that it can be almost impossible to sort of know all the things that will happen as a result of you pressing go.
Which is an important point, because a big part of becoming proficient at DevOps as an organization is automation. Automating your tests, automating your deployments, automating your rollbacks, so that you can, if you do 50 deploys a day, each one of those has a much smaller chance of breaking something than if you do one deploy a day, or one deploy a week, or one deploy a month. Like the faster you can kind of, I put this image up on the screen, but the faster you can get around this loop, the smaller your units of work are going to be. You're going to deploy a single feature. You're not going to have 2 development teams working for a month to release something. You're going to get everything out really quickly. You're going to follow this cycle all the way through and release 50, 60, 70 times a day. And then each one of those is just so easy. And if it goes wrong, it's such a small change that you just roll it straight back again.
And I just want to say, if you have any questions, feel free to send in the chat. Would be happy to answer. We can maybe go through this particular picture that we have on the screen, but yeah, we are getting some shout outs for Alistair. And also one more thing I want to mention is that please send all the relevant questions in the chat, because I'm getting so many messages, had to turn on slow mode because the important questions then get skipped. So please make sure you send one particular question at a particular point of time so that we can answer those. But maybe in layman terms, can we maybe go through this slide on the screen?
I can jump in if you'd like.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the main thing about this is that it describes the integration of 2 traditionally separate fields within software delivery. So on the left-hand side, we've got development, software development. And if we start with the code, or we'll start with the plan, which is right in the middle. So you plan a thing that you would like to create as a piece of software. Then, once you have that idea of how that's going to be structured, you actually write the code. So you pick your programming language and you write the code for it. And ideally what you do then at the same time is you write your tests. You write automated tests that prove that your code works and what it's meant to do. When that code part is done, you build the software. So if it's a compiled language, you compile it, or if you have a build pipeline, which is pulling in all the things that that piece of software needs to run together, you package that together, and then you run your tests. Once your tests prove that everything is exactly how you expect it to, you move to the middle part again, which is release. And that release cycle starts with a deployment. So your code, which has now been packaged as a thing that can run, and specifically, most of the time we're talking about a thing that can run on the internet, you deploy that onto a server somewhere. And whether it doesn't actually matter if it's a physical server that's a computer in your basement, or if it's a virtual machine or a Kubernetes cluster or any of these other ways that you can have software, you make it available, you deploy it, and you're running it through operations. And that's the operating side. With the image seems to have disappeared, but the operation side is the actual running of your application, which then brings us to monitoring. So we are tracking the performance of that application. We're looking at things going, the rate at which things work, the rate at which things don't work, and any other metrics that we might be interested in, which then feeds straight back into what we want to create next. How can we make this thing better? And that feeds into our plan, which starts that cycle again. Hopefully that was clear.
So coming from a perspective of me 10 months ago, looking at this kind of graphics for the first time, right? I think a lot of the confusion that I had at this time, and that some of the listeners right now, some of you might have, is, does it mean that a DevOps engineer would be covering all of this? They would be building the application, developing it, testing it, deploying it, and then making sure that it works in production? Would they do everything just as a single person within a team, or would that be divided between different team members, right? Because usually in organizations, and that's me for the past 10 months, my learning, right? You would have different people, different roles within a team who are responsible for different aspects of this life cycle, right? Depending on how large the team is. Now, if you are a 3-person team, then you probably do all of that, right? And then you would be, but if we're talking about DevOps engineers, what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about somebody who does all of this, or are we talking about somebody who is responsible for maybe a majority of these aspects and then is closely collaborating with the engineers who are developing the front end or the back end? This is my discussion point.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting point in there that, can you have a DevOps? Well, you can definitely hire and you can definitely be a DevOps engineer, but what does that mean? And I think that's what that boils down to. If we're being honest here, DevOps is a philosophy. It would be very difficult to have a DevOps team, a DevOps engineer, unless they act as sort of internal consultants or internal internal developer advocates for the DevOps process and pipelines and how that all works. Because one person can't really do all of this. So how do you label someone a DevOps engineer? I've been in software engineering, I've been in cloud computing for quite a long time, and I've seen sort of an anti-pattern, if you pardon the word. I mean, I'm trying to be really careful here because there'll be people watching who are DevOps engineers or want to become DevOps engineers. I'm trying to be careful not to make you all angry at me, but it's not really possible as a job. It's more a philosophy. And if you hire a team of DevOps engineers, what can they possibly, they could pick any piece of this cycle that we've been discussing. So it kind of, to me, feels a bit like an anti-pattern, right? DevOps is about bringing people closer together, breaking down those walls between developers and operations. But if you suddenly hire a third team called DevOps and sit them outside the dev team or the ops team and just go, right, DevOps now run our GitLab instance. They run our Kubernetes clusters. There's just another set of interactions that have to go on. every interaction is a point for some difficulty, some conversation to go wrong, you to assume the wrong thing. So personally, I think that thing which a lot of people hire for and are labeled as DevOps engineers is really kind of a platform team, platform engineer, which is what I do. Maybe I'm biased here that I don't, platform team, if they're going to be running big parts of your infrastructure, if they're going to be running your deployment infrastructure, they're going to be building a platform for your development teams to develop onto. That allows your developer teams to do the full cycle of this, follow everything through to releasing, monitoring. Your developer team get paged at 3 o'clock in the morning. They take full responsibility for their product. That's to me what it kind of feels like. If you're a DevOps engineer, you're probably more of a platform engineer, unless you're a consultant within your company that just goes around and teaches the other teams how to do the DevOps. I don't know. I feel like I've just ranted for a bit. Go on, Kai.
No. So I worked, and I have a feeling there's a bunch of students on this stream. So I was in academia for years, and one of the things that when you're in university, you have your discipline, you have your subject, but there's this concept of multidisciplinarity or cross-discipline things. So you could be a historian, or a history student, or you could be a student of political history or economic history, and then that's economics plus history together, right? So this is a little bit, the way I see this is a little bit like that, is understanding that there are fields and domains outside of your immediate training, and it's an appreciation of those things. And exactly what Alistair was saying is, like, if you then train somebody to be a multidisciplinarian, what do they do in your organization? What's their role? Are they responsible for keeping the platform stable? Because to me, that's a site reliability engineer, right? Are they responsible for speeding up the rate at which your deployment, so whenever somebody adds new code to the system, the speed at which that gets reflected on the live site, because maybe they're a sort of platform engineer then, or a deployment specialist, right? Or are they looking at things like adding shiny new features and buttons and functionality onto a website? Are they then a developer with some experience? So you need to have experience in all of these parts of the domain, for me anyway.
I think if Alistair, if you could put that image back up, I've got a quick example to run through why this is more of a culture piece rather than an individual role. Because any organization, you want to do content marketing, so you want to get a blog post out. It's a really common thing that you can apply deploying a blog post out to this principle. So you've got your marketing team that are looking at planning. They're looking at investigating what would be really good content. You've then got your content creation team that are writing the code. And it's not traditional software code here. You're writing a blog post. You're getting people that are really good at English or Marathi or whatever it is to write your now code. You then have a build, which will create your blog post on whatever deployment application that you've got. And it will get it ready so that it can go out somewhere. Your test cycle now could be a deployment to staging, and it goes out to the rest of the content team to review it. Or you could get automated spell check in there. You get some feedback during that test cycle and go, oh, I've misspelled a load of words. It's allowing then your content team to go back in and recheck that and update the code. And you're getting a quick little cycle here. You now go on to release and you create a tagged version of this. So you know that blog post version 1 has gone out, and forever in time, if you ever want to go back to version 1, you've got something there that's a tagged release that you can come back to. You then deploy it out. It goes out to you're only a small startup, so you've got one server that's there listening for web traffic. You've got operating there, which is making sure that customers can access your blog post. And you've got monitoring now of working out how many users are accessing your blog. That's a really, really simple thing. But what's really interesting is it goes back into the plan statement here now. So from your monitoring, you know how many views and impressions you've got on your blog post. That's indicating to your marketing team, was this content really good? Should we do more stuff? It's then going to your operations team of going, hang on a minute, I was expecting 1 view a day on this. We've now got 200 views a day. I need to go into a plan setting where I need to support 200 views a day or 2,000 views a day. So your monitor process now feeds into 4 or 5 issues, one for the marketing team, one for the operations team, one for your deployment team to go through. And then everyone now as an organization is following this cycle now of coding, and your operations team are going, how do I scale my web servers up from 1 to 10? Your content team are going, how do I edit this blog post? You go into the deploy cycle, the build cycle, where you're now getting, rather than your single blog post go out to 1 server in staging, your operations teams go, right, let's deploy it out to 3. And we work out how that works. But you've still got your content team creating content that's going out to staging, and you're still enabling them to do their job, while as an operations or SRE team, you're being able to support the organization get their value.
We
have a question on this
comparison.
screen.
I love that, Dinesh.
Yeah, we have a question on the screen by Mark. So Mark is saying, yeah, go ahead, Alistair.
There's always the danger of silos between teams. You get 2 separate groups of people who are responsible for separate parts of your engineering, parts of your organization. They're going to communicate a lot more amongst themselves than they are with other teams. But what you can do is try and get them aligned towards the same goal. And I don't know, it's been mentioned a couple of times, like focusing on the customer, focusing on customer value. If both the dev and the ops team are focusing on providing something, a service, a product, a blog post to their customers as quickly as possible, they'll naturally gravitate together to overcome these obstacles.
I think the problem is seeing it as a way of structuring your team versus seeing DevOps as a way of, as a set of principles or paths that you can take to prevent silos from happening, from having a huge impact on your organization. And then you have different companies, I think Netflix, for instance, they have those small teams where they have multiple different roles in each of those teams. So you have a team of 7, 8 people, and you have, for example, a DevOps engineer within each of those teams. And through these different constructs, you can then further prevent silos from happening and implementing DevOps principles. But it's not, I wouldn't see it as a way of we have here a DevOps team and they are collaborating closely with the engineering team, and that's going to magically prevent silos from happening.
I think we have a follow-up on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, just responding to that question of if you're in an organization and you're the DevOps engineer and you're struggling with some of this stuff, I mean, realistically, you need to go and get top-down buy-in of a culture change and a culture shift in the organization. There's no one tool that you can suddenly go, oh, I can buy this in, and then I can break down the silos and start shifting and everything like that. It's a cultural thing that has to come top down. It's got to be understood by management, and all of the teams need to buy into it.
I guess this question is moving further into how do you get started in DevOps? What should you learn?
Yep.
And I would actually say personally, I would say to this question, it's not either or. It's about when you're learning AWS, you're not learning AWS, you're learning the principles of how AWS works. And similarly, you will then be able to apply that to, for example, Azure or Google Cloud. And that will give you more skill sets or a wider range of skill sets than if you focus on or frame yourself or label yourself as an AWS engineer versus you're a certain type of engineer with certain skills. And one of your skills might be that you're extremely familiar with this platform, but similarly that you can apply those skills also to different platforms. So I think that focus is more valuable. So instead of focusing on CI/CD, specific CI/CD tools, focus on how can you learn to implement CI/CD pipelines in your deployment process. And then to enable that, you can use either of the platforms, but you learning, for example, GitHub Actions, which is for free when you use GitHub, then you can also implement that on other tools. It will still take you some onboarding, but you will still be able to understand the principles of how does the CI/CD pipeline work and what do you need to put it together. That's
that
my
makes sense.
2 cents.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for sharing. We have so many questions left, and we're already halfway through the time, so we can maybe take a few more questions. And the next topic of discussion is how did the DevOps thing come into play?
I'd say, Alistair, you sort of mentioned it at the very start about the sort of beginnings of it. I say you could continue on that.
Yeah, it's had an interesting journey. Originally, it was about stopping this, the two separate teams having two different goals, and they're opposing goals. The devs want to move really quickly because that's their job, to write new features. The ops want absolutely nothing to change, because every time you change something, every time you do a deployment, every time you increase the number of servers you have, that's the possibility for something to break. You either have a misconfiguration, or the developers that gave you the code, it was just wrong. So the original, like the early paradigms of sort of software deployment was the developer role. They may have even been the same person. The developer role wrote the features, wrote the code, and then they gave up something, a zip file, a jar file, something, to another role, another person, could be themselves, that then that person, the operations person, kind of manually deployed onto a server that was in the basement. You know, early days of the internet, companies had to run their own equipment. The cloud computing as a concept didn't really exist. So someone had to walk downstairs with a memory stick, with a floppy disk, with a CD, with their laptop to a server, and then copy that thing, that artifact, onto the server, install it, and then restart. And then suddenly all the new code changes would happen. So the two people have conflicting views. The developers want as many deploys as they can because that's what they get paid for. The operations people want it to be alive, never want to change anything. So it was about shifting the views of those two groups towards the same goal, right? We need to deliver value to our customers. Doesn't matter whether that value is this week, we're going to look at increased stability. We're going to fix some bugs, which is it's good for your customers. The less times things go wrong, the happier they are, or the more customers your server can handle. Doesn't matter if that's new features, a new website. You know, delivering value to your customers should be the only goal in a high-performing DevOps organization. You need to know who your customer is, and you need to know what they want. And it's about breaking your units of work down into small pieces so you can deliver them something of value. So let's say you're going to build a new bank. You could spend 5 years sitting in the corner writing your code, and then end of 5 years, release your bank. Off you go. But it's taken 5 years from start to finish to deliver anything of value to your customer. But if you decided, right, we want to build a bank, but the first thing we're going to do is let people open an account, a current account, and let them put money into it. You build that, and it might take you a month. You deploy it, and suddenly you've provided some value for a customer in 1 month rather than 5 years. They might not be able to do everything they want, but if you then take this model of, okay, well, that's provided value for our customer. What do they want next? What's the most important? They want to be able to spend money from their bank account. Okay, well, we'll take that on as a piece of work. You break your big thing down into lots of small chunks. You do these cycles that are on this sort of infinity loop as fast as possible, and you deliver value. Both teams, whether they're the separate team, whether they're the same person, whether there's 10 development teams and 10 operations teams, if everyone's goal is to deliver value as soon as possible, and the organization buy-in from like leadership is that we want this to work and we want you to all collaborate, then driving towards that goal. That's kind of it. That's the basics of that. I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about how I distill DevOps as a concept down to like the smallest chunk. That's it. Deliver stuff of value to your customers as quickly as possible.
Thanks a lot for sharing that, Alistair. And I just want to share that there's a Google form in the description and also in the chat. Maybe you can send in your questions over there because all the important ones were like getting missed. So you can send as many as you want. It's not limited to 1 responses. You don't even have to sign in or anything. Just feel free to send in your question and all the relevant ones to this particular session. I'll make sure that I ask the panelists. Kai, you were saying something?
Oh, no, I was just wholeheartedly agreeing with Alistair, going like, ultimately, we are here as whatever part of the software development, delivery, whatever life cycle, we're here to deliver value, and DevOps is a kind of thing that developed out of needing to do that faster.
I think going back to something Alistair touched on really briefly, but it's actually really important, is the rise of DevOps in line with the availability of public cloud. Because what public cloud allowed people to do is they gave access to tools developers normally use to manage infrastructure. Because if you had an operations team and told them, here is a REST API where you can create servers, that wasn't in an operations team's day-to-day job. They would need to start consulting the developers and going, what is a REST API? How do I use it? How do I get information out of it? And the developers started offering out, well, this is how it works. Here are some tools. Here are some stats that I can get out of this API for you to create a dashboard. And that's sort of where it started coming up. And you see this rise of the two things coming together, because developers started helping operations and operations started helping developers, because they now had a common goal of managing infrastructure in a way that both teams understood.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. We did get a lot of questions related to what are the prerequisites for this bootcamp. So we'll be starting from scratch related to when I mentioned it in the beginning, the next session is going to be on containers and then building and testing, deploying, and all these other things. So just make sure you ask lots of questions. I'll be sending we have sent the Google form. Please make sure you ask your questions over there. And it's not just this boot camp is going to make you a master in DevOps, right? No, it's more like a starting journey. So enough for you to get started. We'll be sharing some amazing resources and everything with you all. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. And feel free to explore. There's so many amazing resources. Check out Anais' channel, Sayam's channel. He has some really nice content over there as well. But the form that I have mentioned, we are getting a lot of questions over there. So make sure you utilize that. Links in the description of the video, the very first link, the very first line of the description. So make sure you ask your questions over there. Another question that we are getting is, for the rest of the bootcamp, what we'll be doing. So you can just rewind this particular talk. We mentioned that in the beginning, and it's going to be much more hands-on in the future coming days. Cool. Alrighty. Well, thanks a lot for the answer. And the next topic of discussion that we have over here is related to DevOps. Is who is your customer? If you're speaking in DevOps terms. Kai, you want to go? Or answer, or Alistair, anyone?
It's the business. The business is your customer at the end of the day, because as Alistair said, you're deploying value to the business as soon as possible. It's there in that statement. You're there to support features.
There could be more to this as well. I'm a platform engineer by day. That's my job. So you could kind of say my customer is a development team, but also my customer is my employer's customer. So there's more layers to this than just the end customer. Day to day, I have to think about how my changes are going to affect my colleagues, in other teams, my developer friends, my colleagues, but also this concept of DevOps team. If you are in a DevOps team, who is your customer? Is it the development team? Is it the ops team? Is it both? Is it the CEO? Does he just drop in and say, fix my laptop? I don't know. But yeah, it's important to identify who your customer is. And it's not always who you think it is. So I'll just leave you to think about that.
And we also showed the entire, the diagram that we showed that had a lot of things in it. And we have a question related to that, how do you find the domain of your interest in DevOps, since it's a really big, let's say the landscape. So is it more know everything about something and something about everything?
Anais, I think you'd be great at answering this one.
And the thing is, I guess I had a quite untraditional jump into DevOps. So at the beginning, when I got started as developer advocate, like, yes, I had to learn about everything kind of related on DevOps as much as I could. But at the beginning, I tried to transfer as many skills from that are quite unrelated to DevOps, such as technical writing and video editing and public speaking and so on, onto my role. And I think from there, like once you get started with one topic or one area, then you will learn about other topics. And that's when you will kind of figure out what is it that you want to be doing and what is it that you're particularly good at. So if I'm particularly good at breaking down complex topics, is it that I want to enjoy or that I enjoy technical writing and explaining technical topics, or is it that I'm really into debugging complex issues, right? So I think as you move along, you will naturally get a feeling for what is it that you're interested in, and what is it that is also needed within the industry. And just from there, you can then specialize into different areas. But I don't think it's at the beginning, you're not required to have a specific skill set. Like your skill set could be completely unrelated to DevOps to become a really good DevOps engineer as well.
Thank you for sharing. Also, I just want to share that I as a student also use the Civo platform for doing tutorials and stuff. So we have something really exciting coming up in the next few days called the Academy. It's going to be free for all if you want to learn about Kubernetes, some amazing resources. You can get started with Civo. You can sign up, and the links are in the description. You'll get $250 of credit, I believe. So yeah, do try us out and let us know. Cool. So remember when we showed that particular loop, so there was a question related to that, like where does security fit into this loop?
Everywhere. That would be my standard response. Like you can have DevSecOps and all kind of definitions, but ultimately it should be taken into consideration at every point of the loop continuously. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I think there was a question earlier on about shifting left and DevSecOps as well. And this concept of shift left in security is making it easier for developers to do the right thing or have to do the right thing earlier on, rather than like spending months and months building something and then going, oh, security. It's this DevOps kind of loop or whatever gives you the ability to bring in good practices earlier on. So if you're in like an information security or a security role or team, you can kind of do things like when the developers or when the team that's building a service do their build step, you can inject in little hooks to say, just scan the code as soon as they commit it into their version control repository and give them a report, or stop them merging it or stop them releasing it if there's any big security problems. Scan their artifact that they're going to deploy into production. In the monitoring step, you can add in checks for unauthorized access. You can add in checks for crashes. You can kind of hook into this cycle in every stage, and that's why we say everywhere. It really is everywhere. You can be involved in the plan stage. Planning should be open. It should be, a team going, right, we want to build a new feature. Like, who wants to help? Who's got a stake in this? Well, everyone in the business, especially security. Like everyone's job depends on building secure things fast. So get them in right at the plan stage, and they might, you might have a really good security team who send a person in to help you plan and go, oh, don't use this tool, use this tool, or build it in this way. They might sort of steer you in the right direction as soon as possible before you even start writing code. So yeah, you can fit security to anywhere in that, which is cool.
Also, quickly adding up to that, completely independent on what part of the product that you are responsible for, that you are developing, you're the person who knows likely the most about that particular part, right? Even though it's just a button, right? Or an input field. So you should be the one who's responsible for ensuring that people can't provide sketchy stuff into that input field, right? Because you're the one who knows how it's supposed to work. There's not somebody who's magically watching over your shoulder, at least. I wouldn't want that. Who's making sure that you're providing security aspects in your development, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I, as a web developer, if I add a thing, I should know what the latest developments in security are around that particular thing. I will necessarily leave some of the latest ways of getting into Kubernetes clusters to people like Anais, who deal with that day to day, right? So focus on the thing that you know best, but also be aware of all the other ways that unauthorized access and security breaches can happen. But basically, yeah, as early as possible and everywhere.
It makes you more valuable as a professional, I guess, if you are aware of those different aspects and you're able to combine them.
Yeah. We do have a question on the screen, and this is a similar question because we got a lot of questions related to how do we actually like get started. So it's a good question. Like most of the people, yeah.
I mean, the one thing I think I've noticed about everyone that I've spoken to in a DevOpsy role is a real hunger to learn and a real hunger to self-improve and a real desire to work through every little section. You don't need to be an expert in every single section of that, but you want to learn and you want to find out about it and you want to work out if you can help and how you can make someone else's life a little bit easier. And that self-improvement as well is really, really key. So it's going back to that culture thing. Be a team player and always look at improving yourself and improving the product.
So another good question on the screen. Just 1 second. This one. So is it still DevOps if you don't really have any operations? Like we create a desktop modeling application that is installed and run by the customers on their machine. There is nothing we deploy and operate.
You package it. You make it available for people to install, right? You are absolutely doing that.
And somewhere for them to, I assume, download it, or you're shipping out CDs or whatever. So it's definitely there. And you're also getting feedback, right? You're talking to your customers and going, oh, there's a bug, right? How do you go through that cycle then? So monitoring is not a Prometheus server. It's not Grafana. Monitoring is getting feedback that's going into your plan from whatever form that could be.
Question related to some career advice. So some organizations start asking full stack developers to take responsibility of the DevOps section instead of a separate team. What is your opinion about this?
I've done this. I've worked in small companies where there really was only one team. And we've kind of touched on this. Like, if you're a small company, a startup, you are responsible for everything. You build it, you run it, you deploy it, you plan the next phases, you do everything. Like, the tools are out there, and DevOps isn't tools, but the tools are out there to enable you as a team or you as an engineer to be able to follow the cycle. Again, it's a cycle all the way through. You know, cloud APIs, you can use your development environment, you can use source control, you can use your favorite programming language to build application stacks. I can't think of a good word right now, but build your platform to then deploy your application into. You know, the tools are out there to enable you to do the full cycle. I've done it. I've worked on teams. Team of 5, 6, 7 people running a small to medium sized application. People will gravitate towards the tasks that they like doing, especially if you're working using Agile as well, which we're not going to cover. But you might, if you don't know what it is, it's like it's a philosophy of kind of continual improvement, which is kind of like what DevOps is as well. But it's more focused on breaking down pieces of work and delivering the development side of it. But if you think about all of your entire platform as development, even though a lot of it is operation stuff, like running your service and stuff, you can do all of this using development tools. So you can then kind of just do it in your day-to-day. Infrastructure as code, which I think we'll come on to, and CI pipelines, which can be defined in code. You know, if you come from a development background, the resources and the tools are out there for you to be able to build and run applications. And I think when we were putting this session together, we had a bullet point on cross-functional teams. And that's, I think, what this kind of falls into. You have a team and they do everything. They're a cross-functional team. They do the development, they do the operations, they do monitoring, they do the everything. So yeah, it's quite common as well. Anyone got any input? I know I just spoke for ages again.
I'd probably say from my experience is that you start off like that. All organizations, if you go back far enough in the history, there will be the one person that is doing everything. And that's not just DevOps. You've got the one person that's the accountant, that's the marketing person, that's going out and doing everything. And then as you grow, you just fill in the gaps with people that are better than you at stuff. And that's a really important thing to do. Know where your own weaknesses are and get people in. And that's how you let your businesses grow.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing, Alistair and Dinesh. Alrighty. I believe we answered the career options section already. We did talk a lot about the career part. Cool. Let's talk a bit more about the DevOps team in the consultative approach. So, anyone who would like to elaborate on that?
Dinesh?
I don't know. We touched on this earlier on my mini rant about DevOps not being a job, but it is a job and it's fine. DevOps is, as we've discussed a lot, it's kind of a philosophy and it's a way of working and it's a way of running an organization. So if you're in a large organization and you want to go through like a digital transformation, it could be really beneficial to bring in people who've worked in an organization that also does DevOps and does it really well. And you can kind of bring them in as almost consultants. So I've seen this work well and I've seen it not work well. And you can hire a load of people who are really good at the DevOps thing and then airdrop them into the development teams, the operation teams, the management teams. This is an entire organizational wide transformation, or it's a way of doing things. So potentially this is easier if you join a startup that's already doing it because it's easier to change. But if you're working for a large organization and they want to change, you can bring in people who've seen the culture work, and then they can kind of be like tell other people and show other people how to work better together. Really, that's what it is. It's how to work better with your colleagues. Anyone want to add?
I think an important note to that is I don't think you can impose it. Like the consultative approach means that there's back and forth. So if you airdrop somebody in and tell them like, hey, this is DevOps, you need to make sure that the people who are already in the organization want to do that, because it might be a very, very different way of working than they are used to.
And take their feedback on board as well. If they're saying it from a position of knowledge and experience, if they're pushing back against something. So if you're coming in as a DevOps consultant that's looking to implement this into an organization, be kind to the stuff that are already there and don't kind of go, this is my big DevOps hammer, everything is the nail and I'm just going to hit it. Work with teams and introduce things slowly, find out where their pain points and apply the principles and find tools to make those pain points easier, and you'll get buy-in, and then you can kind of go through the organization slowly.
Yeah, there'll be a lot more listening than there is doing in this approach, because you need to listen about where those pain points are. People generally don't like change, and if you're coming in to do a DevOps transformation, it's change. People are resistant to that. Oh, this is how we've always done it. We tried something once and it didn't work, so we're never going to try anything again. These are the kind of things I've heard when I've gone into larger organizations. Oh, we do it like this because once someone pressed the wrong button and it took out production. So, okay, well, how can we stop that happening? How can we do it more safely? It's listening to their problems. A lot of people, may not want to change.
That's why it's also so important to understand the business aspect of DevOps, right? Like to understand how that integrates with the business. So you will have it easier as a DevOps engineer later, like throughout your career, basically, probably.
I think that's, yeah. So all of those things feed into what Dinesh was saying about it being so incredibly important to continue to have an open mind. So like, once you do DevOps, however you define it, you're never done. There isn't the one true way, this isn't karate, right? Every organization is different. People are different. Organizations are composed of people, and you're laying a culture on top, which people will take their way from, right? So, you can learn all about the processes and rituals and whatever of DevOps, but it's more complex than just the mechanics,
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for sharing, and we have a lot to cover for the next few weeks. So the next session will be on an introduction to containers and stuff, and all the things that we discussed in this session. We'll try to get some more, hands-on content for you all. But yeah, really appreciate everyone for joining. I saw 400, 700, 500 people were live, so that's amazing. Cool. Awesome. Well, that was it for this session. But I hope you all had a really nice time. It's recorded. You can watch it later on as many times as you like. Make sure you hit that subscribe button of the Civo channel to never miss an update. And we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.